Hello, everybody. Welcome to ICC's Game of the Day. I'm Grandmaster Joel Benjamin, and today I have for you action from round six from the Tata Steel Tournament in Wijk in the Netherlands. Of course, there's a lot of players in the tournament, a lot of games, so I will very quickly recap ones that we're not going to put on the board, kind of going a little bit in order of less interesting to more interesting. Normally, Magnus Carlsen would be a feature game, but today was black against Aronian in a Slav, lots of liquidation, and boring draw. So not much to say about that. Also, not that much to say about the game Elyanov Karyakin. It was an anti-Berlin, one of those bishop takes c6 variations, and a lot of maneuvering, but nothing much happened. But aside from those two games, there was action pretty much everywhere. And on a normal day, we might have a look at Geary against Nepom. I know that a lot of our viewers think that it's a hold the press moment when Geary does not draw a game, but he won today against Nepom, who hung a pawn in a Najdorf, just a simple tactic. Bishop takes pawn, pawn takes bishop, queen check, and picking up a knight. And tried to get some counterplay, but Geary played accurately, was able to win the game without too much trouble. Then there was Hare Krishna Wojciech, where just around move 40, we suddenly had some tactics. Hare Krishna sacrificed a piece for 4 pawns in the ending, and Wojciech was furiously trying to run them down, and he managed to get them under control and hold the draw with rook and knight against. At the end, it was 3 pawns. So those last couple games were kind of interesting, but the ones we're going to look at, I think, were really interesting. And we're going to start with the game played by the current tournament leader, Wesley So, who black against Adipan, and you might have thought, that's an opportunity for him to try to win another game because Adipan is not been having a great tournament, and of course he's one of the lower rated players. Actually, I think he is the lowest rated player. But it wasn't such an easy time for So, as we see in the opening. Adipan perhaps surprised him with a king's gambit, not just a king's gambit, but the bishop's gambit in the king's gambit, which is really very kind of 19th century, allowing black this check on h4, and then white is prepared to move his king, very Steinitzian. Now, I don't know how well prepared a grandmaster like Wesley So is for openings that you see so rarely like this, but he played d5. I mean, did think for a bit. Bishop takes pawn. They say like some of our amateur players might think, well, what's that? Well, black is sacrificing a pawn for some time because it's a very important element, and here white really has to now offer black this bishop, and black goes in, takes it, and so on. Now, one of the critical moves here is g5, as it is in so many king's gambit positions, trying to hold on to the pawn. But probably So doesn't really have experience in that position, so he just tried to play more naturally with developing pieces, bishop d6. Now, most of the games from this position, white has played d4. And that's because black is getting ready to kick back the knight, so white wants to attack the pawn on f4. Now, black can give a check on h4, which again will displace the king, and that's how many of the games go. Adipan kind of tried to have his cake and eat it too. He played knight f3, preventing the check, but now probably So should kick that knight back while he has the chance. Knight c3, and then again it's possible to play g5 if you're inclined, or you could castle or bishop g4. There are a handful of games that black has done very well in, but they were almost all played between fairly low-rated players. There's just not much practice to go on. But in the game, knight f3, So just simply castled, and now he's in a position where he really has to sacrifice a pawn. And now actually is the first new move of the game. There is one game in the database where black played f6, but after bishop takes f4, it does not seem like black is really equalizing. So tried c6, knight takes, and now f6, so now the bishop can't come out. But after knight d3, white is going to hold on to this pawn for a while. So the game continued, takes, takes, queen b6. Okay, so at least white is not going to castle so easily. Queen e2, bishop f5, so hitting the knight, putting some pressure on e5. Adhiban has to block the diagonal, check. Okay, if bishop d2, queen goes back to b6. Therefore c3. I'm tired of saying so too much in this game of Wesley So's. But now the knight on d3 at least is not so well protected. Bishop c7. And I think this is where Adhiban probably misses his chance for a larger advantage. The move knight c5 looks pretty good for white. And one thing it kind of does is it kind of boxes in the black queen. As we see, the queen was able to exert some pressure the way the game went. And also the black almost definitely does not want to take this pawn on e5. You know, when you play kind of in gambit style, you don't want to be too quick in trying to take things back, because now when white finally castles, he's in really good shape. Black has very bad development. Rook takes c5, runs into b4, and various tactics. The back rank is also weak, which is a problem. And the knight d7 runs into rook takes f5. All right, black should not take on e5, but in any case, white has a definite advantage in this position. Whereas after castles, queen a6, it seems like black is very much more in the game. And then Adhiban's next move, bishop d4, was definitely a mistake. It just ran into c5 because white has not taken care of this pin on the knight. So white needs a better move than that. Computer suggestion is b3, which, by the way, defends his pawn on a2. And it has this idea that white is ready to kind of rope off the black queen from the play in the game. Bishop takes d3. We can see rook takes, knight takes e5, knight takes e5, bishop takes e5, probably slightly stronger than rook takes c4. Now, because the black queen is a little bit out of play, in the position with almost symmetrical pawns, white has some edge, not winning, but some advantage. But the way the game went, we started to have the tables turned a little bit. Now Wesley So had no problems in this position, and actually Adhiban had to play a little bit accurately himself. A nice little move, bishop e4. I can't take, of course, because of bishop h2. But after queen h3, black doesn't have time to make anything of the bishops. Unfortunately, if he had a pawn on b6, let's say, he could just move his bishop away. There could be trouble, but he has to liquidate, and he's not able to maintain an advantage in pawns. Things just keep getting chopped. Bishop takes a7, because if black tries to take, he runs into back rank issues. Check. White can certainly take this bishop on e5 because of the back rank, so definitely nothing there to take the bishop for black. And so tried bishop takes c3, but after bishop f2, rook b1 is coming. Black can't hold on to the b7 pawn, and he was forced to liquidate. Now, Adhiban decided to get rid of some pressure by trading, and so kind of played it out, but not much hope of really winning this with even pawns. And finally, at the end, white hassling the bishop and then taking back the second rank, so the king is going to come out with a dead draw. So Audubon really got what he wanted from the opening, but still was complicated. Wasn't able to see his way to an easy position to work with, try to win the game, and so maintains his position with a draw. From that game, which was a little bit of a curiosity in the opening, we're going to move to a game which is a total curiosity pretty much all around, and that's the game between Report and Wei Yi, and it's really no surprise that that game is going to was crazy today, and we're going to look at that one next. All right, so Report's quirky style of chess is not working out well this tournament. Of course, he had the tragedy of not being able to finish off a nice game against Wesley So. But he keeps plugging away, trying to be creative every round. And what do you do if you want to be creative against the Petrovs? There was that line where White would play the bishop to d3, but that's even pretty much mainstream now. So this is what Report comes up with: knight c4. Okay, he's not the first person to think of knight c4, but he's trying to do something a little different. Knight comes back to e3. And it doesn't look like Black has any special problems, but Rapport has reached a different type of position, and he actually has also come out with a big advantage on the clock. So G3, I thought that maybe Black might want to play D5 here to introduce threats of D4, maybe put the pawn on C6, build a little wall against those minor pieces. It seemed like a comfortable way to play. But Wei Yi decided to go for a quick development with knight to c6 and queen d7. So he guards c6, and he decides to go for queenside castling. Even in the face of this move, b4. Okay, that makes it truly a Richard Report game. To b4 tried to increase the influence of the bishop on the long diagonal. Also make Black kind of worry about this b7 pawn, and well, because the b7 pawn is a little bit of a target. First, Black plays pawn d5, but he actually ends up castling queenside, which is really kind of interesting. Queen d3, and now he needs c5 to guard the knight. So if White shows off his knowledge of the en passant rule, Black can come back and take it, and I think this will come out okay for Black. So Report castles, boom, no fear from Wei Yi. I think, of course, these two guys played a match a little while ago, and now that was reported on my Chess Week recap show. Some very interesting games. So maybe Wei Yi is a little bit inspired to play in the fearless kind of Richard Report style. Of course, we know that he's capable of amazing things. His game against Bruzan in the Sicilian defense with all the sacrifices, considered to be kind of an instant classic. Rook e1, and now things start getting hairy. We have kind of a normal position here, and Wei Yi kind of blows things up with g5, which is probably, strictly speaking, not entirely sound. Report throws in b6, trying to open things up. Wei Yi closes with a6. H takes g5. Knight to g4. And knight c takes d5. h4. And this is kind of the critical position. Right now, Report is in good shape, but it's going to get away from him very quickly, even with the advantage in time that he has here. Now, what he has to do really is just play this kind of a little bit more sensibly than he did, and he should just take the knight on g4. Okay, so Black has two possible captures. Bishop takes g4, he can play, and at first this looks like it could be really good for Black because he's getting ready to try to open lines on the king side. But white can play a simple move bishop b2, hitting the knight, pinning it. There's no idea it's a simple flying with knight f3 because the rook on h8 hangs. And white has a pretty simple threat of just to take the knight. For instance, h takes g3 gets blown apart because white takes this knight on d4. Can't take on f2 because the bishop will take back. If pawn takes, queen check, and now we see some uh-ohs. King b8, queen check. That's something you don't really want to allow. King a8. Is it holding? Well, no. Knight f6. And, well, big problems develop here because tagging the queen, threatening a mate on b7, this bishop on g4 is hang. The check doesn't really change anything. Black basically has to give up a piece. So that position, in that variation, position after bishop b2 would be would be advantageous for white, no question. One last possibility to point out is that you think that black could defend this knight on d4 with bishop g7, but that gives up control of this e7 square, and the rook coming into e7 could be pretty devastating. And don't forget this pressure on b7. So we examine this knight takes g4 a little more, and we see maybe a stronger move for black. Bishop takes d5, knight f6. So at first it looks like bishop takes d5 would certainly be the inferior capture towards compared with bishop g4. It looks like black is losing material, but not so fast. Bishop takes g2. And a report probably, looked at these variations, saw this move, and was kind of dissuaded from it. But this is still probably what white should do. We can take the queen now, and knight f3. That's the big idea behind bishop g2. So white has to take the knight because of king g2. He still loses his queen, but a few more other things as well. So he has to give up queen for a knight. Now he can hit the rook, bishop e2. Rook probably moves, and now I think white should just take this bishop on f8. All right, even though the white king position looks a little precarious, there's just no mate, because if black takes on g3, white takes with the pawn, and that alleviates the mating net. Also, note that I guess this is worth pointing out that something like rook takes d2, white does have a way out with rook e8 check, and well, black just has to interpose the rook because there's no other way to escape check. So he has that one under control. So basically, black is going to have to at some point recapture the knight, and then white can play this bishop's color position, but with advantage in pawns. So we could say probably plus over minus in the old school. I don't know what the people who prefer computer numbers would say, but that's what Rapport should have done. He would have been in good shape. Instead, he played knight c7 and h3. Now he's starting to run into problems, but he exacerbated them with his next move. He just has to, has to grovel a bit, actually. He has to take on g4. And if the bishop takes, he can play bishop e4, and he's more or less okay. So h takes g2 is critical. We've got some more tactics brewing here. Knight takes e6. Rook check. Takes, rook takes rook. Knight takes, queen takes g4. A lot of taking. And it looks pretty much over, but white can make a game of this with bishop b2. Trade, king takes knight, and somewhat surprisingly just capture on d4. And if queen takes d4, actually queen f3, white is okay because he's hitting this guy, and he's also got a threat of g6 with utilizing the pin. So white has kind of compensation there, enough compensation. But after pawn takes f3, in this position, black is certainly better with his extra piece, but not clearly winning, as white has three pawns for the piece. So report had to go for this. It's not much fun. Now, what you're looking for when you're struggling in the tournament. So he goes for bishop b7. I think he just hallucinated on something. I'm not sure what it was exactly. He thought that he was going to have something in this position that he did not. Of course, excellent chances in a game of Bug House, but he needs one more piece to mate. He does not even have perpetual because he does not have the check on b5 and checks on a4. Black can take the pawn on b6 and get out. So rapport started with this trade, but here he still has nothing. He doesn't have time to build anything because black has too much counterplay. That's a big problem. Doesn't have time for quiet moves. So he played b7, and now Wei Yi decided to play king b8 just to repeat the position, give himself a little more time to think. When a grandmaster knows that he's winning, he's happy to repeat the position, just make sure that the time is less of a factor. And now the key nice move, king d5. White's just a move away. D3 would do the job, except it actually does the job the other way because after h2, black gets the mate. This report tried rook e3 to guard f3 so that he can chop a bishop coming in here, but now h2. Nice consolidating move, queen c6. If queen takes rook check, black mates very nicely with the only king move, king c4, discover check, and white is going to be mated on the long diagonal. So after queen c6, report tried rook b1, and Wei Yi just simply traded, developed the bishop, stopped the pawn, and he's just playing with a couple of extra pieces now. Bishop f3 he's loaded up for bishop f3, really nothing to do about it. So report had to resign. So kind of a tragic finish there. Bishop takes b7. Looked like a very nice idea, but there was just no follow-up to it. Report must have seen something that wasn't there. As usual, a very interesting and insane game from Richard Report, but no points for it. Well, the last game we will examine was the last game that finished, Luc von Veli against Dmitry Andreikin. Okay, so this was ended up being quite a long game, but it was pretty interesting from the start. Andreikin, well, Luc von Veli is a rough and tumble player, always ready for a fight, but his level is somewhat lower than everybody else, so people have put the target on him, and they want to win. So Andreikin played very provocatively a6. This is a move that was popular in the 80s. A lot of theory was developed by Lev Albert and Roman Gingi-Hashvili, mostly Roman. We called it the Gingi Indian back then, and there's many interesting transpositional possibilities. But maybe one of the ideas is to get white out of playing the Catalan, because g3, black can play b5. And after knight c3, now he decides to go for d5, and we get some kind of queen's gambit. Now black uses a kind of newfangled idea that's become recently popular, where black just goes right after the bishop. At one time it was thought that this is just something that you don't do. But if black is able to take off this dark squared bishop, he can get a lot of control of the dark squares, and it might very well compensate for any compromise of the pawns on the king side. So Luc goes for bishop e5, knight g7, and now gives a retreat for the bishop. So black takes bishop d6. So that's getting rid of the bishop. You see that black has a little play on the dark squares. On the other hand, at h5, a provocative move, f4, it looks like black might be really trying to do a little too much here. And after f5, bishop c8, actually the position is quite good for white, but not the way that Luc played it. There's a strong move, queen a4 check. It's not so easy to work this all out. Now the computer says that bishop d7 is black's best move, and it certainly is not, because then white will trade everything and take this pawn on d5, and if g takes h3, probably even stronger is just ignore that with e4, and white has a tremendous position. But of course, Andrakin is not going to go quietly to the slaughter. He's going to play a different move. C6 is also kind of interesting. Knight takes c6 and queen g5, and Luke may have not been so interested in this, but it turns out to be good for white. If the king moves, white can take on d5 with a knight. If b5, knight takes b5, and black just doesn't have enough time to do enough on the king side with queen e3 or g takes h3. It's just a little bit too slow. I mean, it's still pretty complicated, though. Bishop takes, check. He can take this rook in the corner. Um, it's the kind of thing that's not very easy to work out over the board. So it's one of those things when you're looking at it, you put it on the computer and you see queen a4 check, big advantage, and then you wonder why did the player miss it? Why didn't he go for it? Well, it's really not that easy to see that this is going to be that good for white. And I think another funny variation is after queen a4 check, king f8 certainly looks like a possibility. And then again, the computer obliges with a very funny looking queen a5. It's a very strange move. It attacks the pawn on d5 and pins the c pawn. So black does not have this natural defense of d5. So after something like queen g5, queen takes d5, again we have another position that is stronger for white maybe than it looks at first, because um, well, you've got all this, of course, pressure on f7, and you could add in bishop c4 if you have to. So black is just a little bit too slow in getting his counterplay. But the move that Van Velde played is aggressive, but f6, I think it's definitely not the right move, because really the best thing about white's position is that pawn on f5 hemming in the black pieces. Knight e6, bishop f5. Now black just defends the center. He's really quite happy to have white take on g4 because it will open up his king. Now black can try bishop takes e5 followed by queen b6, but Andrakin just goes kind of a simple move, queen c7. And now Luke really misses a critical chance to really be in the game. He needs to play e4, try to blast open the center. Of course, black really doesn't want a knight showing up e4, maybe d6, but if d4, white can play knight e2 or possibly even knight a4. I'm not sure which is stronger idea of coming in here. And the thing is that black's center is much harder to consolidate in this situation than in the game. In the game, after just the simple queen e2, knight c5, now black started to take over. And g4 was really probably asking for it too much. That g-pawn is not going to survive, and without the g-pawn, the h-pawn is not going to be that strong. So we went into this ending, which was very favorable for black, rook f4, trying to open the e-file, I guess, to be able to come in and get in with the rook, but Andrakin said no thank you. Rook h4, king, and here I might have expected rook takes rook and rook h8, but for whatever reason Andrakin decided to do it this way and now come back because he wanted h6 in for whatever reason. e4, king e6, takes. Now, should black have taken with the pawn? Very possibly. Still has the idea to come over and get the kingside pawns, but I don't think it's going to be an easy win in any case, because black has to use up time and bring his king over, and that always creates possibility for counterplay. And Draken decided to take with the king. Okay, so a4. All right, I don't know if there was some good idea against this, whether b5 would have helped. We don't have time for a completely exhaustive analysis of this endgame, but Luke came up with a nice idea here. A5. He says, "Okay, my pawns are doomed, but I'm going to go over and get that B7 pawn." And at this moment, even though Black is 2 pawns up, it doesn't appear that he's winning, or at least if he is very, very problematic, because White's not only going to get B7, but it's going to get one of the other pawns as well. There's really just no way to hold on to everything. So he gives up the A pawn. Makes sense to keep the more centralized pawn. And so now we're into this ending, and I think it would take quite a lot of time and computer work to know for sure whether how well this endgame was played. I can't say whether B4 is such a is a good move to start with or not. But well, Luke had hopes that he was going to trade off those pawns, and so he goes for this kind of plan. So that's his plan. He's hoping to trade off those pawns, but he doesn't get there so easily. Now he's a little stuck, and that F pawn is quite strong now. All right, so here comes the C pawn. The problem is that now, because Black got such great king position, that White can't afford to trade pawns anymore. Let's say something like Rook C8, Black can take and check, and well, we're going to get a Lucena position. So Von Velde tried something else. His plan is, okay, now I got my king holding the C pawn, and the plan for White is that he's going to wait for some moment to play B7. He try to trade the B pawn for the F pawn, but he has to time it perfectly, because once the pawn goes to B7, he's running out of moves. So it becomes a battle for tempo. So first Luke waits, and he does this very short of time as well. And this is where it gets away. King G3 and King F2. This is where Andreykin went wrong. From this position, he should play King F2. And what it is it's all about the tempi. Because if B7, we have F3. Now this is a moment when Black's king is shielded and the pawn is defended. So it's not an ideal time to move the rook. The rook moves, Black simply takes B7 and wins. But if King D1, Rook D2 check, and Black repositions the rook. King C2, now he can hold on to this pawn. White is helpless. King back. And now the rook just shields the king, and the pawn is able to queen. Okay, White tries to stop it. He can take B7. So the rook on the second rank is actually much more effective than behind the pawn, because it not only attacks the pawn, but he's able to shield his king like this, and that would be enough to win the game. If we go back to the position where we played B7, I don't think that it helps to play Rook F8, because F3, Rook B8, and then Black makes the same kind of choice here. He goes King F1, and what can White do about that? Same business. If B7, F2, again is Zugzwang, Black and King D1, Black can do Rook D2 check again. So if White tries Rook F8, F2, Rook B8, but now the pawn is not on the 7th rank. This is the problem. White's whole plan was to put the pawn in the 7th rank when Black no longer has a pawn move or cannot move the king out of, or has to move the king to a place where it can be checked. But here Black just wins with King E1 and threatening to queen, and if Rook E8 check, Rook E2, and Black is just too fast. One more move, and I think one more move, and then White would draw. If he could trade and make a queen, but or make a queen right away, but he cannot. So this was an opportunity for Black to win the game, and Andreykin was maybe a little bit too careless, not realizing the tempo. He played King G3, Rook G8 a little too fast, King F2. It's a natural move, Again, played fairly fast, but that blows the win. He needs to play king f3, and then white has to go rook b8, and then he has a chance for king f2 and winning the same way we saw. But after king f2, rook b8, remarkably, black just is not able to get back to that position. He tries king f3, hoping to get a form of what he had before. It doesn't work. But if f3, b7, and black is now in zugzwang. Uh, he needs to have his king already on f1, and then he's winning. But now he has to either move the king to where he could be checked, or if king f1, rook f8 is hitting the pawn and threatening to queen, so it makes a draw. So the game concluded with king f3 and now b7, and now black is the one in zugzwang. He can't reposition the rook, he doesn't have the tempo, and he has to move his king somewhere. And now white gets to take this pawn with his king sitting in front. Rook h4, for instance, is simple and would be an easy draw. So Andreykin missing an opportunity for the win just a few moves before the end. It was fairly simple. He was a little low on time, but he had time to work it out, just kind of careless. And Luc van Velde salvages a draw. But a really pretty deep game, a lot of interesting opening, provocative opening by black, and then into that ending, and who knows what it should have been at the beginning of that rook ending, but missed win for Andreykin, and finally a draw for Luc van Velde. So pretty exciting round, a little bit of the Benjamin bump today. In the B group, Jeffrey Zhang unfortunately lost his game to Eric Hansen. Here are the standings after round 6. Wesley So maintains the lead with 4.5 points. Carlsen and Elyanov remain in second place with 4 points now. And in the 3.5 point group, we have Aronyan, Wei Yi, and Anish Giri. So that's the story from Vaikanze, the Tata Steel tournament. Really been pretty exciting games. I've been enjoying watching it. Will Wesley So pull off another big success after winning the Grand Chess Tour? Is he going to be able to win Tata Steel over Magnus Carlsen, or can Magnus overtake him? Well, we keep watching the tournament day by day. We'll have game of the day every round for you, and should be pretty exciting. So there you have it. I'm Grandmaster Joel Benjamin. I hope you enjoyed that analysis, and please join us again sometime on ICC's Game of the Day.